In 1991, 20-year-old Angela Hammond made a late-night call to her boyfriend from a payphone. There was nothing urgent. She just wanted to say goodnight, to hear his voice one last time before heading home. As they chatted casually, Angela mentioned a strange man nearby, standing next to a dirty green pickup truck circling the parking lot. She laughed it off at first, but then came the scream. Terrified, her boyfriend jumped into his car and raced toward the payphone. Just as he arrived, he saw the truck speeding off, with Angela inside, struggling in the back. He chased them down the road, desperate to save her. But then his car broke down. Helpless, he watched the truck disappear into the darkness, taking the woman he loved with it. He had been seconds away, seconds from rescuing her. And to this day, over 30 years later, Angela Hammond has never been found. The case remains unsolved, shrouded in mystery, fueled by theories and haunted by a single chilling truth. Someone out there knows what happened that night.
Right before Halloween in 1953, this young girl was kidnapped from the home where she was babysitting. She was taken likely within 1 hour of being dropped off. And what makes this case so disturbing is that when her dad came over to check on her, since she wasn't answering any calls, all of the doors were locked and the lights and radio were on. All of the living room furniture had been moved around to different places in the house, and there was a trail of blood leading from inside the house, through the backyard, and then 2 blocks away to a neighboring street. The baby she was watching was sound asleep in her crib, unharmed. And to this day, this girl remains missing. No one knows what happened to her, although whatever it was incredibly sinister. You all know by now that I share all sorts of unsolved murders and disappearances, but this one, it is really bizarre, and it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, which is really hard to do. It's also still unsolved, so let's talk about it. This is Evelyn Hartley. She was only 14 years old when she mysteriously disappeared in 1953. She was known for her kindness and intelligence, as she was an honor student at her high school in La Crosse, Wisconsin. She loved playing piano and hiking, and she also loved being around young kids, so she would often babysit for her friends and family. And on October 24th, 1953, she was doing just that. That night, she was hired by a professor at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse to babysit his almost 2-year-old. The professor's name was Viggo Rasmussen, and he hired Evelyn because Evelyn's dad Richard was also a professor at the same university, so they all knew each other pretty well. Viggo, his wife, and his older daughter all wanted to go to a La Crosse State homecoming football game, but he wanted to leave the baby at home, thus why he hired Evelyn. So that night, Viggo picked her up and took her back to his home around 6:20 p.m. Evelyn brought with her 5 textbooks as she planned to study while the baby slept, but sadly, she didn't even get the chance to do that. Evelyn was supposed to check in and call her dad at 8:30 p.m., but that time came and went, and it was silent at the Rasmussen house. Her dad tried calling the home several times, but nobody answered, and at this point, he was starting to freak out. So he drove over to the Rasmussen home, and what he found would forever change his life. So upon arriving, all of the doors leading outside were locked, but all of the lights were on, as well as the radio, which was blaring throughout the house. Several items, including Evelyn's textbooks, were scattered all over the place. And what sends chills up my spine is that all of the living room furniture had been moved to different places in the house. Her dad found her shoes in 2 separate rooms, one in the living room and one down in the basement, and Evelyn's glasses were laying broken upstairs. The baby she was watching was sound asleep in her crib, unharmed, but Evelyn, she was nowhere to be found. Richard quickly called the police, and what they found is so scary. So every room in the house was locked except one, and that was the door leading into the basement. This was located in the back of the house. A window was open and it was missing the screen, which investigators found lying propped up on the outside of the house. A short ladder that belonged to the Rasmussens was positioned up against the open window, and what's so incredibly creepy is that investigators found pry marks on almost all of the windows in the house. They also found bloody footprints in several different locations in the house. Authorities then found a trail of blood coming from inside the house and out through the backyard, which continued for 2 blocks until it stopped at Cooley Drive. What stumped investigators, though, is that they also discovered bloody handprints about 100 feet away in a nearby house and garage that didn't belong to the Rasmussens. The blood trail they found in the backyard, though, had an interesting pattern. About halfway through the yard, the blood started pooling, which indicates that Evelyn's abductor either dropped her or stopped to rest before continuing to drag her away. missing. Police believed that Evelyn was kidnapped from the house and then taken through the backyard. Tracking dogs were quickly brought in, which picked up on Evelyn's scent. It led them from the house, through the yard, and then it stopped 2 blocks away near the blood on Cooley Drive. Investigators believe that Evelyn was then forced into a car where she was then driven away. A massive search for her began almost immediately, which involved local police, thousands of volunteers, the National Guard, members of the Boy Scouts, and the U.S. Air Force. So this was a huge search, but absolutely no trace of Evelyn was ever found. They searched basically every vehicle in La Crosse County, and they ordered every gas station attendant to inspect every car for bloodstains. And police even reopened recently buried graves to see if Evelyn was thrown in there with them, but they found absolutely nothing. Within a few days, though, people started coming forward, which helped piece together a timeline of Evelyn's last moments. A neighbor told police that they saw a light-colored car repeatedly driving around the neighborhood, and it was one they didn't recognize. Another neighbor heard screaming coming from nearby at around 7 p.m., but at the time, they thought it was just kids playing. And then a local resident named Ed told police that on the night Evelyn vanished, he was driving near the home and was almost hit by a dark green, two-tone 1942 Buick as it sped past him. As they passed, Ed said that he saw a man driving and a second man in the back seat sitting next to a young girl that matched Evelyn's description. It didn't stick out to him at the time since he didn't know she was missing, but then he remembered that just a few minutes before that, he saw the same 2 men walking down Cooley Drive. They had the same young girl and she was wedged between them. The 2 men were holding her by the arms, and it kind of just looked like she was drunk, so he didn't say anything. This was right around the corner from the Rasmussen house, near where Evelyn's scent trailed off. So this was a promising lead, but then even more evidence started piling in, which made investigators hope that Evelyn would soon be found. But sadly, that was not the case. A few days after Evelyn disappeared, several articles of clothing were found within a couple of miles from the home. More specifically, it was a pair of women's underwear and a bra, and they were coated in blood. They were found near an underpass about 2 miles south of La Crosse, and investigators don't know if they belonged to Evelyn, but that's not all. About 4 miles down this same road, a pair of men's pants were found, as well as a pair of Goodrich size 11 men's sneakers. Near the shoes was a size 36 men's denim jacket, and all of these items were soaked in blood. The sole pattern on the shoes matched to the bloody footprints at the crime scene. But again, that's not all. The blood on the denim jacket also matched Evelyn's blood type, and the blood that was in the Rasmussen home. Investigators believe that the denim jacket, or at least a denim jacket material, had smeared the blood at the crime scene. And this checked out because the sleeves on the denim jacket were also coated in blood. Authorities don't know how much of this is connected, but they definitely think that the denim jacket was worn by whoever kidnapped Evelyn. They also contacted the Goodrich company and found that those specific men's shoes were only made in Wisconsin, Iowa, Michigan, Minnesota, and Illinois. So this narrowed down their search just a little bit. And based on the wear of these shoes, police think that the owner of these shoes likely worked with heavy machinery, and somehow the evidence suggested that the owner also frequently drove a Whizzer motorbike. So this was one step closer in finding out the truth, but Evelyn was still missing. In the summer of 1954, mass lie detector tests were conducted on high school boys all throughout the county. Police were trying to do everything they could to try and find out any more information, but they were only able to conduct about 300 before the operation was shut down due to being controversial. As of today, Evelyn remains missing, and although we don't know what happened to her or who was responsible, there are a few theories. Theory number 1 is that Ed Gein was responsible. Ed Gein was a suspected serial killer and a body snatcher, who was also known as the Butcher of Plainfield. He was incredibly disturbing and scary. He's confirmed to have killed 2 women, but is a suspect in many more murders. When police searched his house, they found human remains literally sewn into household objects and clothing. And at the time of Evelyn's disappearance, Ed was visiting a relative who lived just a few blocks away from the Rasmussen house where she disappeared. But Ed denied any involvement, and he did pass a polygraph test. Although police officially ruled him out as a suspect, some still think that he could be responsible. And what are the odds that he was right there and then she just happens to go missing? And the only other theory came in 2004. A man named Mel Williams came forward with a recording that he took at a local bar in 1969. He was trying to record a local band playing, but he unintentionally recorded 2 men nearby having a disturbing conversation. The men nearby were Clyde Peterson and Jack Golfair, and they were talking about how they were involved with Evelyn's disappearance, as well as a third unnamed man. They talked about how they kidnapped and murdered her and then buried her body in LaForge, Wisconsin after the fact. Sadly, at this point, all three of these men had long since died, so police were never able to follow up on this lead. What's so heartbreaking is that both of Evelyn's parents died without ever knowing what happened to her. It's just so scary to me that someone took her within 1 hour and made her disappear forever. And it freaks me out how every single window had pry marks on them, and how all of the furniture was moved around the house. What were they even doing? But it's now been 72 years, and whatever happened to Evelyn inside that house remains a mystery.
Scott Peterson is innocent, is what a lot of people believe. And honestly, I was baffled when I heard about this, so I did have to do some digging, and I went into a massive 2-part podcast episode on it. I really wanted to understand why the LA Innocence Project took him on and what evidence they have to suggest that he could possibly be innocent. By the sounds of it, a massive part of this is the burglary that took place across the street. Now, this burglary happened the same exact day that Laci went missing. Now, is it incredibly strange and weird that a robbery happened the exact same day? Yes. Do I think this confirms Scott is innocent? I'll let you guys make your own mind up, but personally I don't think so. The majority of the evidence in the Scott Peterson trial was circumstantial, and people love to shit on circumstantial evidence, but let's be reminded that circumstantial evidence is still evidence. Scott's team states that the prosecution never explained when Scott killed Laci, and nobody has ever given a series of events that fits the circumstances and explains how Scott could have killed Laci. Now, that is true, and a murder weapon was never actually found, but what if Scott was the weapon himself? You know, there are ways to murder people that don't actually require a physical weapon. Scott's team also emphasized the fact that there were a few eyewitnesses who claimed to have seen Laci the morning she was reported missing, or somebody who looked like Laci. Now, this was at various points throughout the morning, and they reported seeing her trying to get control of a dog, and one witness stated that they saw what looked like Laci accompanied by 2 random men. Now, it was 2 random men that actually committed the burglary. I go into all of the details on this on the Bourne Investigation if you want a deep dive, but one of the most convincing pieces of evidence that they put forward of Scott's innocence could be the burglary and the mystery van. A house across the road from the Petersons actually got burgled that Christmas, and an orange van was found burnt out nearby. Scott's defense team requests to retest an apparent bloodstained mattress that was found in the van. They hope that new DNA technology basically confirms that somebody else was involved in Laci's killing. But some people, including me, think Scott Peterson is clutching at straws. Please let me know what you think in the comments.
One thing that I will never be able to wrap my head around is how this little boy was killed in broad daylight in a park where it was witnessed by other kids. Actually, I take that back. He wasn't just killed, he was slaughtered. His throat was cut from ear to ear, and it was so deep that his spinal cord was showing. And his private area, as well as flesh from his butt and thighs, were removed, and none of it has ever been found. So many people saw his killer, and so far, this composite sketch has been shared worldwide. Yet whoever did this is still out there. In 2020, police announced that Christian Bruckner, the main suspect in the Madeleine McCann case, could be responsible. And it's crazy to me how much he looks like the composite sketch. But this case is still unsolved, and it is incredibly disturbing, so let's talk about it. This is Tristan Brubach. He was 13 years old when he was killed in broad daylight at a park filled with people in 1998. Tristan was described as super shy but really sweet, and he was known to be very street smart. His mom died by suicide 3 years prior to his untimely death, and it left Tristan's dad raising him alone in Hearst, a suburban on the outskirts of Frankfurt, Germany. This was a really tough time for him, but he found joy and spent most of his time just walking around his neighborhood. He also really loved animals, and although he was super shy, he would go out of his way to approach strangers who were walking their dogs just to be able to pet them. This brings us to March 26, 1998. That day, Tristan went to school like usual, but about halfway through the day, he started to not feel very good. He complained about his back hurting really bad, so the school excused him at around 1:30 p.m. Shortly after this, a fellow student saw him on a bus headed to the Frankfurt Hearst railway station. This student was one of Tristan's friends, but he was on a separate bus. But he saw him once more at around 2 p.m., still on the same bus as earlier. He tried to get Tristan's attention, but it didn't work. So the friend got off at the next stop and walked to the train station to try and find it. He couldn't. After a little while of searching, the friend just left. About 20 minutes go by, and another student walking home saw Tristan sitting on a bench alone at the train station. And at this point, nothing was out of the ordinary. The last time Tristan was ever seen alive was about an hour later, and this time he was at a park directly across from the train station. This was the Bruno Asch Anlage Park, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Tristan never made it home that day, and roughly 40 minutes later, his body would be found. A couple of children were walking home that day and discovered Tristan's body in the Liederbach Tunnel, which is a pedestrian tunnel that runs along an underground section of the Liederbach River. The kids ran back to the school to tell their teachers, and within the hour, police would be notified. This was an incredibly gruesome scene. Tristan had been beaten past the point of unconsciousness and strangled, but that isn't what killed him. His throat had been cut from ear to ear, the wound so deep that his spinal cord was visible, and this is what ultimately killed him. But it gets worse, so just brace yourself. Tristan's private area, as well as the flesh from his butt and thighs, had been removed as well, and to this day, none of it has been found. He'd also been stabbed numerous times. The knife that killed him was laying on the concrete right next to him, and whoever did this staged his body to make it look like he was sleeping. What's absolutely horrible is that 3 teenagers actually witnessed Tristan being killed, although at the time, they didn't know that that's what they were witnessing. But they weren't the only ones who saw Tristan's killer. First person to see him was a 12-year-old little girl who was walking through the tunnel on that fateful day. She saw this man at about 3:50 p.m., so 30 minutes after he killed Tristan, popping out from behind a bush. He was wearing a hat and had a long ponytail dangling from behind. Another person who saw this killer was a paralegal in the area, who said this man came up to him and said, quote, "I just got out of prison and I've already screwed up," end quote, before leaving. So all of these people were interviewed and gave their description of the killer. The man was between 20 and 30 years old. He either had a repaired cleft lip or a big scar on his lip. Overall, he was just very unkempt. Some thought he looked homeless. From those descriptions, police were able to put together this composite sketch of the suspect, which was shared worldwide. It gave them some hope that the killer would soon be found, but sadly, that was not the case. Based on evidence at the scene, investigators believe that Tristan was quickly ambushed and killed near the river and then left to bleed out. Then the killer dragged his body to the tunnel where he proceeded to mutilate it. This all happened within 15 minutes. I know some might not think that 15 minutes is a long time, but this was a public park and tunnel. So the fact that he managed to do all of this in 15 minutes without one single person stopping him is so scary. After the composite sketch was released, someone close to Tristan's family came forward and said that she is certain that she saw this killer before. And even more creepy, she saw him with Tristan in the days leading up to the murder. The last woman that ever saw Tristan alive says that she believes she also saw his killer, but her description was a little bit different. That day, the woman was sitting on a bench in the park when Tristan sat down next to her. He was alone at this point, and he was smoking a cigarette. After the two had some small talk, the woman got up to leave, but as she turned around and looked back at him, she saw 2 men sit down on both sides of him. One of them looked pretty similar to the composite sketch. Tristan would be murdered 20 minutes later, not even half a mile away. So while his family was forced to have his funeral, the killer was still out there on the loose. And just one day after the funeral, a possible break in the case happened. It came in the form of a phone call. The supposed killer called the police, confessed to killing Tristan, gave them his description, and told them that he'd be waiting for them at the train station near where Tristan was killed. But when police arrived, he was nowhere to be found. Part of this phone call was released to the public, but this caller has never been identified.
Christian Mörder. Wie bitte? Christian Mörder ist hier. Sind Sie? Ja. Und Sie wollen sich selber stellen, oder was? Ja. Ja? Wo sind Sie denn jetzt? Frankfurt Höchst. Frankfurt Höchst? Ja, und wo dort? Am Höchstbahnhof. Am Bahnhof? Ja. Ja, umgebracht. Sie haben ihn umgebracht? Ja. Wie sehen Sie denn aus? Wie groß? 1,80. 1,80. Haare? Schwarze. Schwarze Haare. Lange oder kurz? Lange. Lange Haare. Nehmen Sie mich fest.
Police did what they could to locate this maniac, but it was like he just vanished into thin air. 1 year after Tristan's murder, police found his backpack in a forest about 15 miles away from where he was killed. In it was a road map of Germany, all in the Czech language. This map did not belong to Tristan. He couldn't even speak Czech, and because it was linked to his killer, police expanded their search to the Czech Republic and Slovakia, but they could never trace him down. Over the years, there have been many false leads and potential suspects, one of which caught investigators' eye. It was a local man named Manfred Manfred Seal, who was a very well-respected member of the community, a very unsuspecting guy, but when he died in 2014, his daughter found some horrifying things in one of his storage units. She found human remains as well as a diary in which he drew pictures of real-life murders. Police then found that Manfred was unknowingly a serial killer who took the lives of 5 women between 1971 and 2004. I want to be clear though that police found no physical evidence linking him to Tristan's case. The victim profile was completely different, but Manfred lived close to Tristan, which is what caught their eye. He would also mutilate and keep his victims' genitals, much like in Tristan's story. Ultimately, in 2017, he was ruled out as a suspect in Tristan's case, but he was still a really creepy guy. The only other suspect came to light in 2020, and honestly, it's pretty shocking, at least to me. Police stated that this man, Christian Bruckner, could be tied to Tristan's case. What's so shocking to me is that this man is also the prime suspect in the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, as well as other child disappearances and assaults all over the place. He's currently in prison being held on unrelated charges, but police believe that he could be involved because of his similar perversions, a roadmap to Germany found in Tristan's backpack, and how similar he looks to the composite sketch of this killer. And I'll be honest, when I first started researching this case, I saw the composite sketch, and before I even knew anything about it, I honestly thought that it was Christian Bruckner. Update on this was in 2020, so I'm not sure if anything will ever come of it. But if he is responsible, I hope he gets charged accordingly so that Tristan, as well as Madeleine McCann's family, can receive justice. As if this case couldn't get any more disturbing, in 1999, someone broke into the cemetery where Tristan was buried at night and dug up his coffin. His coffin was never opened, but this is still just horrible. Police believe that whoever did this is just one disturbed person, not someone who is actually connected to this case. Sadly, Tristan's dad, the only member of the Brubach family left, died in 2015, not ever knowing who took his son's life. This is one of the saddest and most disturbing cases I have ever come across, and I just can't believe it is still unsolved. But it's now been 27 years, and whoever did this to Tristan is still out there, and why he did it remains a mystery.
You've just been told that your teenage son has died, but he's also killed 4 other people. How the hell do you process that information? Jordan McGinnis was an 18-year-old boy from the Gold Coast in Australia, and honestly, he had the perfect life. He was good looking, he was intelligent, he had loads of friends, had a loving family, he'd actually just started at the Griffith University and was super sporty and sociable. It was December 2012 that everything would change. Jordan and his mum Melissa headed out on a shopping trip together, and she tried on a cute black dress and asked Jordan what his opinion was. He said she looked really pretty, and neither of them had any idea she'd be wearing that very same dress to his funeral just a week later. On the 8th of December, Jordan went out with a bunch of his friends to a Christmas party in Brisbane, and that night he drove there, he parked his car, and he went in and he sat and he drank alcohol and he smoked M. Now, despite this being horrifically irresponsible, he then decided to drive himself home in the early hours of the morning. And it wasn't even like he was being careful, he actually drove way over the speed limit that night. And suddenly, terrifyingly, his car collided with a stationary vehicle. Now, I believe the car had been parked because it had broken down and it was a car full of people. This collision was horrific. The other car burst into flames like an absolute fireball. People inside were Natasha Maggs and Alan Sullivan, both 20, along with another couple, Cody Holland Williams, age 18, and his girlfriend Tiana. A 15-month-old baby was also inside of the vehicle, who was shockingly the only survivor. Both of the child's parents were killed in the horror blaze. The baby was taken to be looked after by extended family, thank God, but honestly, this just does not bear thinking about. And obviously, Jordan's family, when they were told that he had passed away, and then they were told that he'd also killed 4 other people because of his actions, they just had so many mixed emotions, understandably. They were like, how the hell do we arrange a funeral and talk about all of the good things about Jordan when he has just caused all of these people to die? Now, I feel so sorry for Jordan's mum just having to deal with that conflict of emotions. It just must be absolutely horrifying. She actually said in interviews that she felt like she'd failed as a mum, which obviously definitely wasn't her fault at all. And his parents now advocate for more education around young people and reckless driving.
So the other night, I got invited to a special early screening of The Conjuring Last Rites. So thank you, Warner Bros, for that and for sponsoring this video. I even got to meet the producers who actually watched the movie with us in the theater. Plus, I got to take some pictures with some really creepy props and drink specially crafted drinks tailored to the movie. It was such an unforgettable experience, and trust me, after watching, I can honestly say this might be the scariest Conjuring yet, and here's why. Every Conjuring movie is based on a real paranormal case that Ed and Lorraine Warren investigated. This is the final chapter of the Warrens on screen, and it's inspired by one of their most disturbing investigations, the haunting of the Smurl family in West Pittston, Pennsylvania. Unlike Annabelle and the Enfield poltergeist, this wasn't just about a haunted doll or a family being tormented. This was different. And don't get me wrong, Annabelle was terrifying, and the Enfield poltergeist literally still haunts people's dreams. But this was about an entity so powerful that the Warrens themselves became the target. And according to their files, it wasn't just a demon, it was something much older. Something that one of them silenced forever. That's why this movie is so terrifying, because it's not just another haunting. It was their most dangerous battle, and the one that nearly broke them. All I know is that this case and investigation was so disturbing and evil that the Warrens refused to even make the files public. That is, until now. I'm telling you, you guys need to watch this movie. It was so disturbing, and it definitely made the hair on the back of my neck stand up, and it wasn't just because the nun was literally behind me. Watch The Conjuring Last Rites in theaters on September 5th.
Imagine your child being eaten alive at Disneyland. I can't imagine anything more horrific. It was a gorgeous day on the 14th of June 2014 in Orlando, Florida. Adorable little 2-year-old Lane Graves was on holiday with his 4-year-old sister and his parents, Matt and Melissa. Lane was from Nebraska, and he was described as bright, really loving. Even though he was only like a tiny little boy, he just had this massive personality. He had this really like warm, kind-hearted nature. Now the family was staying at Disney's Grand Floridian Resort, and they had so much fun planned for their trip. They were really looking forward to spending the summer together. The resort is absolutely gorgeous. There's no way you would ever associate it with such a horrific incident. The resort did have a lagoon. It was absolutely gorgeous, like I said, but the lagoon did have a very small sign that indicated no swimming, obviously. Nowhere at the lagoon did it say that the waters were alligator infested. It looked like a calm, peaceful lake type of vibe, the place where I would just absolutely love to go with my family, like just sit and enjoy the water. You would think that obviously as long as like parents are there making sure that their kid doesn't actually go inside the water to drown, that everything would be safe. At 8:30 that evening, the family were chilling, building a little sandcastle on the beach area by the lagoon. And the little boy's dad was right by him, like literally right next to him. But in a split second, suddenly everything just went to absolute horror. He heard a splash, and out of nowhere, an alligator jumped out of the water and grabbed the little boy by the head. Matt obviously immediately ran into the water, trying to grab the alligator, trying to risk his life to save his little son, as you would. Unfortunately, the alligator was extremely strong, and it just made Matt a target too. Both the dad and the little boy were pulled underwater. Bear in mind there are other families as well, like witnessing this horror unfold. Sadly, it was too late. This all happened in like the blink of an eye. Witnesses of this horror attack actually passed out because of how traumatic and hideous it was to witness. Matt was raced to hospital, and eyewitnesses said that he had blood all over his hands and his face. Horrifically, the little boy was pronounced dead. He was found in the water hours later. It actually came out later that 2 people had been into the resort to report that there were alligators around, that they'd witnessed alligators, but clearly nothing had been done.
This 15-year-old boy had a seemingly perfect life, but then he massacred his entire family and showed zero remorse or emotion afterwards.
You are a stone cold killer. 4 people have been murdered tonight. They're dead. You cannot lie to me. I will drag you down with this. What happened? You will go to jail for the rest of your life. I'm looking in the eyes of a stone cold killer. There's no remorse.
The Browning family from Maryland seemed picture perfect and were extremely well off and wealthy. The father, John, was an attorney. He was also a church leader and also the scoutmaster for his son's Boy Scout troops. The mother, Tamara, was a dedicated stay-at-home mom. Together, they had 3 sons, 11-year-old Benjamin, 13-year-old Gregory, and 15-year-old Nicholas, and together they just seemed like the perfect family. 15-year-old Nick Browning seemed like your typical all-American golden boy. Nick came from a wealthy family. He had lots of friends. He did sports. He was really smart. He was an honors student. But beneath the surface, there was something really dark about Nick. People from Nick's school said that he kind of seemed like a spoiled rich kid and a bit of a jerk that would, and I quote, make fun of minority and disabled students at school, end quote. Nick could also be heard at school quite often joking about killing his dad for his money and or killing his entire family. Nick was really violent with his younger brothers. He would also steal from his parents, and he would just get away with everything. His parents would try to discipline him, but it never stuck. And then on the evening of February 1st, 2008, Nick's dad dropped him off at a friend's house for a slumber party. It was Nick and a handful of their friends, and they were just hanging out, and then out of nowhere, around 1 a.m., Nick told his friends he was going to be leaving. He was going to sneak back to his parents' house so he could steal their car, and then they could all go for a joyride. But Nick was gone for hours, like over 4 hours, and by the time he got back, it was like 5 a.m., half the people were already asleep, and Nick didn't even have his parents' car, which was really strange. They asked him what he was doing for the past 4 hours if he never even got the car, and he said that he just got lost. So he was wandering around for the past 4 hours. The next day, one of Nick's friends' dads were driving them all around. He took them to the mall, and then the arcade, and then back to Nick's house because he said he wanted to check in on his family since he hadn't heard from them all day. So Nick and one of his friends went inside his house, and inside he found all 4 members of his family murdered inside. Nick and all of the sleepover friends were brought into questioning, and they were all interrogated separately. And it was pretty much immediately that all of Nick's friends separately told the exact same story. Then Nick left the sleepover the night before to go back to his parents' house, was gone for hours, came back, and he didn't even have what he said he was going there to get. And they also told the investigators that Nick had joked about killing his entire family a lot. The interrogation of 15-year-old Nick Browning is very odd. Only like 2 hours after he found his entire family slaughtered inside of his house, Nick Browning was able to take a 45-minute nap before he was interrogated. He asked the officers to go get him some fast food. He was able to eat. Only hours after finding his entire family murdered inside of his house. During his interrogation, he claims his innocence. He said he doesn't know who killed his family, but he's completely emotionless. This 15-year-old boy has just found his entire family dead, and he's perfectly fine. Eventually, the officers that are questioning him tell him that they think he's lying, and they believe that he is a killer.
Your brothers didn't do it. A burglar didn't do it.
How can you say that?
I can tell, buddy, this is what I do for a living. I've been doing it for 22 years. You know how many burglaries I've been to? You know how many homicides I've been to? I sit here every day talking to people just like you. I didn't do it, I didn't do it, I didn't do it. And this just goes on and on and on. And you did do it. If you didn't do it, you wouldn't be sitting here. I'm telling you right now. Nobody broke into that house.
How can you be so sure?
I'm positive. I'm 100% positive that nobody broke into that house. I've been to plenty of burglaries. I know what a burglar looks like. When you walk into a home and the house has been burglarized. Your house wasn't burglarized.
This was no burglar?
Nobody broke in. Nobody went in there and killed your family. You did it. And you had a reason to do it. Yeah, you did.
What would my reason be?
Your father was pissed at you last night. Maybe he didn't like your lifestyle. I don't know.
How could I not like my lifestyle? I go to my summer house for 2 weekends. I get whatever I want, I get it. I mean...
People do it every day. Why do people walk into schools and shoot all their friends?
Because they're picked on. They don't enjoy it. I enjoy my life a lot.
Okay. Again, I know people that love their children. They kill their children. People love their babies, but they kill their babies. People kill other human beings. This isn't an armed robbery. This wasn't a burglary.
By your whole family being dead, you make out the most. I'm sure your father was well insured. Your mom was well insured. Now everything's yours. So you coldly killed your parents? Then there's got to be another reason why you did this other than insurance money. That's the way you're going to be looked at. The 15-year-old killed his family for money. I didn't kill my family.
Yeah, you did. We're gonna do this all night, man. It wasn't anybody else but you. Yeah, you did. I'm telling you, you did.
Everything about it, the way you act, you're acting as if you're a guilty man. We've interviewed hundreds of people in this room. Hundreds of people. And they all fit your mold.
What is that mold?
You're a stone cold killer. I'm looking in the eyes of a stone cold killer. There's no remorse.
The entire interrogation of Nick Browning is available online, so if you are interested, I definitely recommend checking it out. This is what really happened the night that Nick's entire family was killed. Nick called up one of his little brothers and asked him to unlock the basement door so he could sneak in later. And trying to be a cool little brother, he does it. He unlocks the door, not knowing that unlocking that door would allow his older brother to come in and murder him later that night. And when I read that, it absolutely broke my heart how people could be so evil. Nick breaks in through the basement door that his brother opened for him. He goes upstairs, he sees his dad sleeping on the couch, and he shoots him twice with his dad's own weapon that he found in the basement. He then goes upstairs and he murders his mom and both of his little brothers. He then returned to the sleepover like nothing was wrong. The next day he went to the mall and the arcade with his friends like nothing happened, like he didn't just slaughter his entire family. And also, I just want to point out that he let his friend and his friend's dad go inside his house and find his family's dead bodies, just adding more trauma to more innocent people. Nick thought that he was going to be able to get away with this, but eventually he does confess after he realizes that there was a lot of evidence against him, and the officers that are questioning Nick are begging him, please just tell us why. Why did you kill your parents and your two little brothers? Why did you do this? Over the years, Nick has told a lot of reasons why, but the one that he has said the most was that his father was abusive, emotionally, but also physically, and that he was just really hard on him. Personally, I don't know if that's true. I don't think I'm the person to say if I believe him or I don't believe him. I don't think that that's a reason to kill your entire family, your little brothers and everything. But I will say that there are members of Nick's family, you know, aunts, uncles, cousins, that believe him, and there's also members of his family that do not believe him. But there's no way that we'll ever know for certain why Nick Browning killed his entire family, because everyone that would know is dead. Nick Browning was really convinced that he would be found not guilty by reason of insanity and or be charged as a juvenile and get a slap on the wrist and be able to go home, but neither of those things happened. He was arrested on 4 counts of first-degree murder and was going to be tried as an adult. Eventually, he took a plea deal and he was sentenced to 2 life sentences with the possibility of parole after 30 years. But despite how young he was when he committed these terrible quadruple murders, it's very unlikely that he will ever be released out on parole, because apparently in the state of Maryland, for parole on a life sentence, it has to be approved by the governor, and that hasn't happened since 1994. Nick has tried to reduce his sentence multiple times, and they've always been denied. In 2002, behind bars, he got a bachelor's degree as well as an MBA. He's a part of a program where you can become pen pals with an inmate, and on his profile, he says that he has 0 siblings. That really angered a lot of people when they saw that. Let me know what you think about that. Do you think it'd be worse if he said he had 2 siblings because he murdered them? Or do you think it's worse that he's just denying that they existed altogether? Nick Browning will be eligible for parole for the first time in 2031, which is in about 6 years from the time I'm uploading this video. By that time, he will be in his early 40s. And despite not showing even an ounce of remorse immediately after killing his entire family, today Nick Browning says that he would give his life to take it all back. Please let me know all your thoughts on this case in the comments section, and let me know if you've ever heard of it before. Have you seen his interrogation? While you're in the comments section, please let me know what case you want to see me cover next. Thank you to every single person that suggested that I covered today's case. Please be a good person to your fellow person. I will see you guys all next time in my next video.
Imagine watching your entire family be killed, and when you come face to face with the killer, you ask, "What's going to happen to me?" Only for him to respond, quote, "Well, honey, you're going to be in heaven tonight with the rest of your family." End quote. That's what happened to the Otero family, who were all killed by the BTK killer, aka Dennis Rader. For those of you that don't know, BTK stands for the acronym of his preferred killing method: bind, torture, kill. You know, lots of things creep me out, but nothing could prepare me for what police found when they searched his house. They found a little box, sealed and kept hidden from the rest of his family, and in it were mementos from the BTK killer's crime scenes. The photos are of Dennis Rader himself. He would dress up in his victims' clothes and underwear, choking and burying himself alive. He would reenact all the ways that he killed his victims for these photos. It's just so disturbing. It's been 51 years now since his first murder, yet we're still learning of new victims. Long forgotten cold cases that are just now being discovered and connected back to him. So let's talk about it. This is Dennis Rader. He's a serial killer who tormented Wichita, Kansas, killing at least 10 people between 1975 and 1991. But when he was caught, his friends and family and those closest to him were all shocked. To them, he was this devout Christian, hardworking, and respectable family man. There was no way that he could have done these horrible things, yet he did, and he was secretly living a double life. So let's bring it back to when everything first started, when he was a teenager. As a kid, Dennis used to spy on his female neighbors, and he knew from a young age that he had some sick sexual fantasies, amongst other things. He would cut out photos of pretty women from magazines and draw ropes and gags over them, and he would then please himself with his own hands and feet bound with rope and a plastic bag over his head, a method that he would later inflict on his own victims. Dennis also found joy in torturing and hanging animals, so there's that. Fast forward into adulthood. Dennis joined the U.S. Air Force, and once released, he became an electrician in Wichita, Kansas, where he would soon meet and marry his wife Paula in 1971. They met in church, and Dennis seemed like a really good guy. He was a Boy Scout troop leader and the council president at his church. He was so trusted that he even had the keys to his church. By all accounts, Dennis was a God-fearing good man, but this would all change by 1974. On January 15th, 1974, Dennis killed his first victim. It was an entire family, actually. Once his wife fell fast asleep, Dennis broke into the home of the Otero family and killed everyone inside. This included mom and dad, Joseph and Julia, and their two kids, 11-year-old Josephine and 9-year-old Joey. 2 months before the murders, he drove by the family's home and saw Julia leaving to take her kids to school. He then stalked the family for 2 months before striking. That night, he cut the phone lines and snuck into their backyard. As little Joey opened the back door to let their dog out, Dennis forced his way inside and held the family at gunpoint. At first, the Otero family thought he was joking, but it soon became clear that he wasn't. After binding them all and tying them up, he put plastic bags over Joseph, Julie, and Joey's heads and secured them with rope. He then strangled the mom to death, and poor Josephine was forced to watch as each of her family members died. Dennis too sat back in a kitchen chair and watched as they all slowly suffocated. He then took Josephine down into their basement, took her clothes off, and then hung her from a sewer pipe. She came face to face with Dennis and asked, "What is going to happen to me?" To which Dennis coldly replied, quote, "Well, honey, you're going to be in heaven tonight with the rest of your family." End quote. As she choked to death, Dennis watched and pleased himself. He then took photos of their bodies and kept some of Josephine's underwear as a sick trophy. After this, Dennis went home to his wife, and early the next morning, he got ready for church as if nothing happened. The Otero's bodies were found early the next morning by their 15-year-old son, who was not home at the time. On April 4th, 1974, Dennis struck again. He began stalking Catherine Bright, a 21-year-old college student. That evening, Dennis broke into her apartment, but she wasn't home, so he waited. When she finally got home, Dennis was shocked to find out that her little brother also lived with her, so she wasn't alone. He then held the two at gunpoint and tied them up in separate rooms, blaring the radio to drown out any noise of a struggle. He then shot Catherine's brother twice, once in the forehead and once just above the mouth. Yet somehow he survived, and he was able to run out of the house while he attacked his sister. After hearing the gunshots, Catherine put up a huge fight, so Dennis couldn't strangle her like he planned. Instead, he stabbed her several times just below the ribcage and then took off. She survived up until she was in the hospital, where she sadly later died of her injuries. Her brother described the killer as having psychotic eyes, but still, Dennis managed to evade authorities, keeping his illusion of an honest family man. As this was all happening and he was taking lives, he and his wife actually made one. And 3 months into her pregnancy, I guess Dennis got bored and wanted attention, so he began writing letters taunting the media and police, describing in great detail how he killed the Otero family. He would write confessions and call himself the BTK killer, which stands for his preferred method of killing: bind, torture, kill. He wrote, quote, "How many people do I have to kill before I get my name in the paper or some national attention?" End quote. The BTK killer promised the media that he would kill again, and this is what ultimately caused panic all throughout Wichita, Kansas. No one knew who was going to be next. Dennis said that after he learned that he was going to have a baby, he got busy and took a little hiatus from killing, but it resumed in 1977. On March 17, 1977, Dennis broke into the home of Shirley Relford and her 3 kids. He S.A.'d her and strangled her with a rope and a plastic bag, while her 3 young kids were barricaded in the bathroom, all watching through the keyhole of the door. Dennis said that he planned to kill them too, but the phone rang and it scared him off. It was at this point, though, that Dennis's wife began finding odd things in their home. First was a poem titled Shirley Locks, which was written by Dennis. It read, quote, "Thou shalt not scream, but lay on a cushion and think of me and death." End quote. Dennis's wife had heard of the BTK's 6th victim, Shirley, and she did find this really weird, but she didn't ask questions. Not even when she found a bunch of newspaper clippings about the BTK killer in the house, circled and written on in what Dennis described as his own secret code. She didn't even question when she saw these taunting letters from BTK on the news, and noticed that the killer misspelled the same exact words as her own husband, Dennis. The only thing she ever said to him was, quote, "You spell just like BTK." End quote. All of this is creepy, don't get me wrong, but what I find to be the most creepy is what Dennis kept in his home that Paula knew about but was ordered to stay away from. Dennis kept a sealed box in the home they shared, which Paula never looked in because Dennis told her to stay away from it, which if that was me, I think I would be looking because I'm nosy. But what's creepy is that inside that box were mementos from the BTK killer's crime scenes. So dead women's underwear, driver's licenses, and these really creepy photos which show Dennis dressed up in his victim's clothes and underwear. He would reenact all the ways he killed each victim. It's just crazy that with all of this unusual stuff at their house, that Dennis was able to keep getting away with this secret. But he did, and he killed his next victim on December 8th, 1977. Dennis had been stalking 25-year-old Nancy Jo Fox, and that night he broke into her home and cut the phone lines. He told Nancy that he just wanted to tie her up, take photos, and S.A. her because of his weird fantasies. And before he did this, he let her smoke one final cigarette. Then he tied her up and strangled her with his belt. Dennis struck again on April 27th, 1985 with his 8th victim, 53-year-old Maureen Hedge. Maureen lived right up the road from Dennis and his family, and Dennis would actually wave to her every single morning on his way to church. Dennis reportedly picked Maureen because he wanted to see if he could kill someone so close to his home and get away with it. So that night, Dennis was actually a chaperone at his son's Boy Scout retreat, but once all the scouts fell asleep, he snuck off the campsite and broke into Maureen's home. Once again, he also cut her phone lines and then tied her up and strangled her. He then put her body in her own car and drove her to the Christ Lutheran Church where he was the council president and let himself inside. He then staged her body all throughout the church and took photos before dumping her body back at her house. He returned to the campsite before morning, so no one suspected anything within the Boy Scouts. What's so disturbing is that at this point, Dennis's own family started to get really worried because now Maureen had been killed by the BTK killer, and it was so close to their own home. But Dennis reassured them and said, quote, "Don't worry, we're safe." End quote. A year later, Dennis struck again. This time his victim was 28-year-old Vicky Wegerle, who he had also stalked for some time. He then killed her as her 2-year-old watched from the playpen. Dennis would kill for the very last time, at least that we know of, in 1991. On January 18th, 1991, Dennis broke into the home of 62-year-old Dolores Davis, who lived just a few miles away from him and his family. After he killed her, he dumped her body near a bridge where it would be found the next day by a teenager walking his dog. Fast forward to 2004. This is when Dennis came across an article in the newspaper detailing the 30th anniversary of the Otero family massacre. He started to get really greedy and wanted everyone to keep talking about the BTK killer because he was a loser and just wanted attention, and this is ultimately what got him caught. Dennis proceeded to send around 12 taunting letters and packages to the media and police. The packages contained some of the BTK victims' underwear, some dolls that were bound and gagged just like how the killer would, and one even contained a pitch for an autobiographical novel that he wanted to write called The BTK Story. But he made one major mistake. Dennis included a floppy disk in these packages, and police were able to find the metadata of a deleted Microsoft Word document in this disk. This turned out to be a document for the Christ Lutheran Church, written by none other than the church council president, Dennis Rader. Police then compared DNA samples taken from his victim's fingernails to his daughter's pap smear analysis, and it came back as a match. Dennis Rader was the BTK killer all along. On February 25th, 2005, Dennis Rader was arrested. As he was being taken out of his home, he assured his family that everything was okay. But inside the police car, he was asked, quote, "Do you have any idea why you're being arrested?" end quote. And Dennis smiled and replied, quote, "Oh, I have suspicions why," end quote. Dennis then confessed to all 10 murders throughout Wichita, and at the trial, it seemed like he enjoyed describing the details of how each of his victims died. One of the key pieces of evidence in this case, outside of the DNA, was that police found a ton of Dennis's writings from during the murders. He gave each victim and murder a title. For Catherine, he referred to her as Project Lights Out, Project Fox Hunt for Nancy Jo Fox, and Project Piano for Vicky Wegerly, as he stalked her late at night and would listen to her play piano in her home. He also had other project names for other unidentified intended victims, those of which we don't know about as he never confessed. As a result, Dennis was sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences with no possibility of parole, leaving behind his wife and 2 kids. What's crazy is that even today, police are still discovering potential victims of his, and they're using what Dennis Rader is most known for to connect them: a 20-year-old word puzzle that he sent to a Kansas news station in 2004, right before his arrest. This word puzzle that he put together spells out the names of his 10 known victims, as well as locations connected to each victim. In 2022, police were reviewing this word puzzle when they noticed the name Cynthia Kinney, and this immediately shocked them, because Cynthia Kinney was a real 16-year-old girl who vanished from a laundromat in June of 1976. And after looking further into this word puzzle, they noticed the word Kaiheka, which is the street where the laundromat Cynthia vanished from was located. At the time of her disappearance, Dennis was installing a security system for a bank right across the street from said laundromat. And in one of his old letters, police found an excerpt titled, quote, "Bad Laundry Day," end quote. So now Dennis is a suspect in her case, although she remains missing. He's also the prime suspect in the 1990 death of 22-year-old Shauna Garber in Missouri. She was bound, essayed, and strangled in the same exact way as the BTK victims, but her remains weren't identified until 2021. I think what's so scary to me is how normal everyone said Dennis seemed. Like, on the surface, he seemed like this picture-perfect family man and loving husband and father. But really, for 30 years, he hid the truth. A killer so cold and calculated that he hunted and preyed on young girls and women just like his wife and daughter. That's why it's been so hard for his daughter to fully heal, because according to her dad Dennis taught her morals, taught her right from wrong. His family and those who knew him had no idea what he was truly capable of, and that's terrifying to me. It's now been 51 years since his terror began, and although he is officially behind bars, his actions continue to haunt those left behind in his wake.